Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. Penny Cook is a fierce advocate for older adults who has dedicated her career to changing the aging experience. With a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a master's in social work, Penny's past efforts were focused in Colorado through her leadership with the Colorado Culture Exchange Coalition and Colorado Access. Over the past nearly 3 years, she has expanded her influence as the president and CEO of Pioneer Network, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the culture of aging and enhancing the quality of life for those who live and work in long-term care communities. For more than 28 years, Penny has provided education, training, and advocacy related to the care and support of elders. Penny's greatest passion is helping us all value and respect our own aging, as well as those that we serve.
Well, welcome everybody to the bright side of longevity. Very excited today. We have a guest we've been waiting for a long time, but she's been very busy lately. So we finally cornered her, and Penny is going to be with us today. And I'd like to think that we're traveling in not only in the same direction, but in some ways along the same road. Masterpiece Living and Bright Side of Longevity, and the Pioneer Network, which Penny leads. So we both want to go to the same destination. Let's use this as an analogy. We want to help older adults. We want to help the aging experience, the living experience, the lifespan experience of everyone, and have it as higher quality as possible. And I think we're traveling down the same road because we both like the culture road. We feel culture is incredibly important to getting there, certainly for individuals, but more importantly for a society and for a population of older adults. So I see you right over there driving along the road with us. Penny, it's about time we rolled down the windows and shouted at each other. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Roger, and I love that analogy. That's perfect. And right now we're talking outside of windows, right? Because that's what we're doing.
That's what we have to do. You're right. Exactly.
So, Penny, over the years, long-term care communities have been evolving, and the Pioneer Network has something to do with that. So tell us what the Pioneer Network does and give us a sense of the evolution of communities over the past even few decades.
Sure. Well, I think that how I would describe it and sum it up is that we're really evolving towards creating true home for people who live in senior living communities. And that's what Pioneer Network has really been about. We started 23 years ago. We had a group of founders that were just doing very cool and innovative things in the world of aging services and specifically in the world of nursing home care. Because if you think about it, 23 years ago, nursing homes were really the type of congregate living setting that people would move into if they needed care and support. Assisted living communities were just in their infancy. And people really thought that we needed to create the true home in nursing homes. Nursing homes were originally modeled after hospitals, and we know that hospitals are not places that people would want to live in. And so we had multiple people living in the same room and long corridors and those pictures of the traditional nursing homes. And along with that, we had a system that really didn't think of those places as home. So Pioneer Network for those 23 years has really been working to change the culture of nursing homes. And now as the spectrum of offerings have changed in the world of senior living, we've moved into working with assisted living communities and continuing care retirement life plan communities, really to provide education and training on truly changing the entire culture of those communities. And also we work on the policy side of things too, because we can't change that culture unless there's policies to support that. So we work on the federal and state level to change policies related to senior living as well.
Well, fantastic. And you're being very successful at it too.
We're trying.
So here comes the hard one, the one you expect. During this time of COVID-19, we, of course, have seen some of the statistics and where some of the more severe cases of COVID-19 have been, and many of them are in senior living. And so I know your answer to this, and I know how I feel about it, but I want to ask it from the perspective of someone who's not sure, and they see all these frightening statistics. And so the question is senior living a place to be during a pandemic?
Well, you know, Roger, I think it's a great question, a loaded question, and one that, as you said, so many people are asking. And, you know, I want to take the legal route in answering it. It depends. And I say that because I think about those communities that during the time of the pandemic have involved residents and staff members and family members in the decision making that they're asking, that they're needing to make. They're asking for input regarding restrictions, regarding visitation, regarding practices, and they're providing that support and socialization and care, if needed, to the people who live there. And if a community is providing all of those things and wanting my input, I'd say, of course, I'd want to live in that community, just as maybe beforehand I would want to live in that community. But if it's a community that is not involving the people who live there, that are calling that community home, I would say it's not probably a place I'd want to live during the pandemic, nor again before it. So I think that if it's that person-directed, person-centered community, then that's a place I'd want to live during the pandemic or you know, after it. And so it really does depend. And I think it's just like any sort of service that we actually get involved in life. You know, we decide if it's something that is of good quality or it's something that's not.
So inherent in your answer, which was an excellent answer, is something that I think is very important, that the fact is all senior living communities are not alike. And during this challenge, there have been those who've risen to the challenge, have been very disciplined, caring, and sometimes having to make very courageous decisions that aren't popular necessarily with the families of people who are living in senior living community. But I think those who are willing to do that and who really are committed to the quality of life and the health of their residents, I think they did very well. We have many, many terrific success stories between us. I know we do. Mm-hmm. So good point. You know, don't put them all in one basket and think that maybe the worst story you had is indicative of all of the communities. We have some excellent outcomes from this in some of our communities.
Well said. So one thing I've noticed since the quarantine has begun, we've seen frontline workers being recognized and celebrated as they should be, you know, your hospital staff, truck drivers, grocery store employees. But we don't see that in long-term care as much. Why are they not celebrated in the same way, do you think?
Well, I think it's a great question. And again, I think that what's happened is that this time that we're in with COVID-19 has just magnified some of the existing issues that we've seen in senior living. And unfortunately, I think that historically, we've had a negative view in our society of senior living. And this starts with what I was talking about before with nursing homes. So many times we looked at nursing homes as places that people would go to die. And I think that attitude about nursing homes has carried over a bit, and unfortunately has carried over a bit in senior living, along with the fact that I think we're a very ageist society overall. And so we don't necessarily value growing older. We don't necessarily value elders. And unfortunately, I don't think we place the same value on the people who work with older people and all of us who are aging. And so I think that plays into it. And we've seen so many media reports about some of the negative things that have happened in senior living communities during this time of COVID-19. And Roger, as you pointed out, one community is not all communities. And we know that sometimes that those negative reports are a bit sensationalized in the media. So I think we lump senior living staff members, into that same group, unfortunately. And we know that it's so unfortunate because they are such caring, compassionate people. And I think that if we have to do it, we have to do it. We have to make it this intentional that we recognize them. If the rest of our society, if our country's not going to recognize them as much, then it's up to all of us that are working in senior living to make sure that we do that.
Senior living, we have espoused it. We have talked of its many benefits, particularly with the social connection that's possible and the continued stimulation and continued growth that can go on in every area of our lives. But in this time of a pandemic, that congregate living sort of thing puts everyone at high risk. We saw it in universities, we saw it in the military and on ships, and it wasn't senior living. It was any place where people were together. And there's tremendous benefits to that social connection. We see it every day, don't we, Penny? And so we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, on this. And so once again, building on the previous question I asked, how can we restore the confidence there? How can we work with our partners to restore the confidence in senior living and talk about the benefits to being in senior living?
Well, I really think that we need to show what is happening in senior living. As I said, sometimes we only show the negative, but I think that it's up to all of us in senior living. I think it's up to senior living communities themselves kind of to toot their own horn. Sometimes we don't like to do that, but I think in this case, we really need to show people all of those things that are going on and all of the benefits of senior living communities. And Roger, you mentioned this. I mean, the social aspect. Senior living communities just aren't about care and support. They're really about socialization, about helping people to continue to grow as they are aging, because that potential is in all of us. And it's wonderful to see, we all have examples of this, of people who move into senior living communities and are more engaged than ever in life, who are teaching classes, who are much more involved in their external community even than they were before. So I think we need to show those pictures. And I also go back to what I said before. I think that those communities that have transparency and open and honest communication, they're not going to need to restore the trust of anyone because they've been doing this all along. I think they just have to continue that. And for those communities that have been more challenged, I'd say that this is a lesson learned, that this is a way to restore trust. There are some very, very good communities that have had outbreaks of the virus within their communities, but it really depends how they've handled it. When they've alerted everyone and informed everyone, I think we know in our own personal experiences that mitigates so many things. And it makes people feel so much more comfortable and trusting of where they're living. And I just think that's incredibly important during this time and moving forward as well.
I've heard tremendously positive stories from residents about how happy they were to be in senior living during this time, all the time, but particularly in this time. And you're right, we should toot that horn.
So good. So speaking of, Penny, what are some of the positive things that you've seen and heard happening in senior living during these times? And then second part is, how do we continue to enhance those as we move forward?
There have been so many stories that have come out during this time. And I think that what I've been most impressed with is the compassion and the care and the patience and the service of staff members, but also of residents in senior living, of family members, and people outside those communities as well. The unity of people coming together during this time has just been amazing to me. I look at the village of Park Springs, a life plan community in Georgia, and their staff, they decided that the best thing that they could do is sort of isolate together. And what that meant is a community. And so the staff moved in to Park Springs, and they stayed with the residents during this time.
Wow.
And just picture what that has created, this family of Park Springs. It's not an us and them, it's all of us being together. And then they switched. I can't remember how many weeks that they all spent together, and then a new group of staff members moved in. We have a former board member who lives in a CCRC in Northern Virginia, and I've been talking to him. We've been emailing on a daily basis. And one of the things that he said is that the staff members now are like family. That they decided during this time that they were going to develop a garden for their whole community. And so the staff and the residents got together and they started gardening. And it was just an activity that they could do during this time. And it was something that they all could enjoy. But I think the other amazing thing I've seen is great creativity and ingenuity that has come out of this from staff, from residents, from communities in general. I mean, it's been amazing the different things that people have done to make sure that connection is maintained. And I think that that's what senior living does. I think that we have a group of such resourceful people who live in senior living and who work in senior living, and that needs to be celebrated. But the trick is going to be how it continues, because we all know that, we're a little flighty at times, and we can move from one thing to another, and what was great yesterday isn't great today. And so I think we really need to look back on those things that we've done, those things that have worked, those things that have brought us together, and make sure that we are very intentional in moving forward with those. And I think it can be done. I think this has showed everyone that we're more flexible than we thought, and we can adapt more than we thought that we could, and we can embrace change and look at it as a positive. So we just need to remember those lessons.
Brings a whole new meaning to we're all in this together, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And I think that you're right, Roger. There are a number of different congregate living settings out there, or congregate living arrangements, whether it be college students in dorms or senior living. But I think that in senior living, we have just seen everyone come together.
It's so interesting because we're all about getting people physically together because we know the benefits of that. And that's all we've ever done, really. At least that's the ultimate goal. The end game is to get people physically together and interacting. So I feel like there's never been a time where we've had to be more creative to keep people socially connected but physically distanced. Like we've never had to be this creative ever.
I totally agree. And back to something else you said, I have always been impressed how people who work in senior living, the associates, that is not a job for them. That is a calling. It is clearly a calling. So you have very, very special people who we see can be in it together and be creative.
I just love that, hearing that they moved in and created like that family environment and are gardening together. That just, I don't know, gives me goosebumps. So you had mentioned this earlier. You really like organizations that are bringing the residents, the team members, the family members into the decision making. So how do we balance the rights of people who are living in senior living communities with some of the risks we're seeing with the virus?
I think that is the challenge. I think that first and foremost, obviously, communities need to look at the federal guidelines from the CDC, CMS, if applicable to them, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and then their local and regional and state health departments for guidance. But beyond that, I think they really need to look at what's going on in their community. we partnered with Plaintree to develop a set of person-centered guidelines for family presence. And one of the reasons that we did that is because we really wanted to make sure that everyone was remembering the people who live in these communities. And as you said, to have their voice involved. But one of the things we also said is not every city is the same. Not every state is the same, and what's applicable in one city is not applicable to another, because we know that the virus is hitting geographic areas differently. So I think you really need to assess what's going on in your own neighborhood, in your own city, and start there. I also think that you have to make sure that you're not just using someone else's guidance, and you're actually looking at, for instance, in a CCRC life plan community, the different levels of care and support you're providing. What might be applicable for one area of your community might not be applicable for another. So I think that that's very important, in not using a one-size-fits-all approach. And then, as I said before, I also think you need those collective voices. The residents who live in senior living have so many years of life experience. Why not use that experience and having them be part of the discussion about restrictions, about visitation, about that guidance? It really needs to be a collective approach, because when that happens and everyone feels that they've had a voice, you're going to have a community that is going to weather this together. And you're not going to have people who are saying, you know what, I don't agree with that. I'm not going to adhere to it. I mean, we see that ourselves everywhere. And so, but when people are involved in decision making, I think that there's just a better outcome overall.
Well, I think that particular point that you just made regarding asking older adults for their input, I think that's symptomatic of what we have been doing in our society, is marginalizing our elders and all this human capital and all this wisdom, which previously we never pushed to the side. We used it to guide us. And why didn't we do it this time? I know you and I both know communities that did do that very successfully and do it every day. But that is a major point, I think, and probably one of the major positive features of living in senior living. Certainly the ones that we partner with and the ones that see themselves as greater than just taking care of people. And it is about quality of life. Well, Penny, you have infused us with a great sense of optimism and positivity and for the road ahead. We appreciate that. You do that every day. That's why we asked you to be on. And today was no exception, except it was exceptional. And we thank you for that. And Danielle, I know they're going to want to get in touch with Penny and find out more about the Pioneer Network.
Absolutely. Penny, if you could share how they can get in touch with the Pioneer Network, and we'll also make sure we post any links to our description of this podcast. So how can they find you in the network?
Of course. So you can always visit our website at pioneernetwork.net. And then anyone can contact me at penny.cook@pioneernetwork.net as well. I'm always happy to take questions or comments from people and start a discussion, especially about these types of issues.
Well, I look forward to traveling down this road some more, Penny. Thank you for being with us today.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.